beautiful people out there. How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season off, season it doesn't matter because it's football. I'm your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to the final podcast of the regular season, or should I say, coming straight off the regular season of the 2022 National Football League season. Before we get into the show today, I'd like to ask, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this kind of content or know anybody who does enjoy this kind of content. It really helps boost my exposure, get us out there to more eyeballs. So if you would like to do that, and if you haven't done that already, please do so. It would mean the absolute world to me. Also, if you have not already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And if you haven't already, go follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. On there, you will get exclusive content such as my weekly picks during the regular season, as well as certain draft content I will be doing on Patreon throughout the off season. I will be doing draft content starting fairly soon. Most likely right after the Super Bowl is when it will get into the full swing of things, both on the channel and on Patreon. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, please go support me on there. It would mean the absolute world to me. Or you don't have to. You don't have to do any of the things I just asked you to do. Just the fact that you took the time out of your day to sit here and watch this means the absolute world to me. So thank you very, very much for that. The links to those, the Twitter and the Patreon, will be in the description down below. But let's get on with the show. The 2022 regular season is officially in the books. The playoff picture is officially set. Playoffs kick off this Saturday. I am so excited for it. We've been waiting all year for this. But regular season is over. There are some things we like to talk about now that the regular season is officially over. And that is, what is the outlook for 2023 for the vast majority of National Football League teams? And that starts with, there's some head coaching opportunities that are now open. 5 of them at the time of recording this, to be exact. I feel like if there's any head coaches that are going to get fired, I think that ship has sailed at this point as we are recording this on a Wednesday. Black Monday has passed and gone. And we only had 2 coaching casualties on Black Monday, but there are 5 open in general, as we had 3 head coaches that were fired in the middle of the season. And I just want to start off by going through each of those position openings, which positions seem like would be the most attractive, and I'm going to go in chronological order in the essence of which position was opened first. So in this case, it would be the Indianapolis Colts all the way to the most recent opening, which is that of the Arizona Cardinals. So, oh wait, I messed up. The first opening was actually early in the season. It was the Carolina Panthers. My apologies. I forgot Matt Rule was a thing. So, the Carolina Panthers were the first team to axe a head coach during the season. That was when they fired Matt Rule. After, I can't even remember, was it after 6 weeks or so? But that was something that honestly should have been done before the season. I've talked about this early in the year, where he should not have been the head coach coming into 2022, Matt Rule, that is. But all of a sudden, a team that they fired Rule in the middle of the year, they then traded away Christian McCaffrey not too long later at the deadline. And it just felt like it was a team that was ready to wave the white flag on the season. Everyone's saying, hey, ship off your best pieces, try and get as much draft capital as you possibly can to hit the reset button. Except this team all of a sudden was competing. They were competing. They were winning games you didn't expect them to win. They were in a lot of games you weren't expecting them to be in. All the way up to the point where the second to last week, they had a legitimate chance of having a home playoff game. They had that destiny in their hands. And obviously it didn't work out for them. But it is going to be very, very interesting because Steve Wilks came in as the interim head coach. And, you know, they have schedules as far as scheduled interviews for coaches. They currently have a scheduled interview with Frank Reich, former Colts coach, which we'll get to the Colts situation later. And they also have a scheduled interview, there we go, with former Lions and Colts head coach Jim Caldwell at the moment, as well as some requests for some other D coordinators who are currently other coordinators who are currently in the postseason. But out of all the head coaching availabilities at the moment, this, in my eyes, is definitely the most appealing, because this is a team that has shown that they can compete. They have some really good with the ground game going. Deontay Foreman had a really nice year for them, especially ever since trading away Christian McCaffrey. They still have some great young pieces in DJ Moore and Brian Burns. Shaq Thompson's still there. Jeremy Chin is still there. They have some really nice pieces there. Ikem Ekwonu looked like he was a really good pick in the first round. So they have some pieces that add a few more, maybe even add a quarterback to the mix, though Sam Darnold played as well as you expect Sam Darnold to play. But I don't know if he's not. He might be a guy that you look at and say, all right, let's keep him on the roster for next year potentially, but not a guy you want as your full-time starter because he hasn't earned the trust to be a full-time starter, at least not yet. And I don't envision Sam Darnold taking the Geno Smith level jump in 2023 if he does become the starter. I just don't. But I say this, but I don't know if it's open, that being the head coaching position, because if you ask me, I feel like Steve Wilks has done an incredible job as the interim here, and I feel like I'm trying to find the right words here. I feel like he's done such a great job with turning this ship around, where it looked like it was a dead loss season. We are tanking to the number 1 overall pick, to this team was competing for a playoff spot late in the year, and Steve Wilks was a huge part of that. He had this team playing with fight. He had this team playing with heart, and I think he has done more than enough to solidify himself as the guy who should take the reins heading into 2023 as the full-time head coach. Steve Wilks is the guy that I've always felt like he got an unfair rap in Arizona, where he got hired in 2018, got fired after 1 year, even though he was coaching a really bad Cardinals team that had Josh Rosen and Sam Bradford as their starting quarterbacks that year. So I feel like he got an unfair rep in that regard. So I do think he's deserving enough of an opportunity to be a head coach, whether here in Carolina or somewhere else. And I think it's going to be in Carolina. Yes, they have these interviews set up with other coaching candidates, but I do think it's ultimately going to be Steve Wilks' job. And it's kind of why I hesitated to say that this is a true head coaching opening, because Steve Wilks has done such a fantastic job. So, but if it does become open and Steve Wilks isn't brought back as the full-time head coach, it is a really attractive spot where I think a coach can come in with his staff and bring in some extra players. All of a sudden, you're looking at a team that could potentially be a dark horse candidate for the NFC South next year, especially if Brady does leave, and it looks like he's going to leave. The NFC South's going to be wide open, and who's to say the Carolina Panthers can't be that team to step in and be the new kings of the NFC South with a new head coaching company? I see that as more of a possibility. Now, the next coaching opportunity that became available was that of the Indianapolis Colts, who I want to say shockingly, but at the same time not so shockingly, fired Frank Reich in the middle of the season. I remember it was right after they got embarrassed by the New England Patriots, a game where they started Sam Ehlinger for a couple weeks. They benched Matt Ryan. It felt like his career was over at that point. They played Sam Ehlinger for a couple games, and that was clear as day. He is not an NFL quarterback, not even remotely close to a starting quarterback. And they go into New England, get destroyed. Offense can't do anything. And the next day, Frank Reich was out of a job. And like I said, it was shocking, but not so shocking because this was a Colts team that had people forget because it was so short. People, even though it was not too long ago, people forget this team has legitimate expectations coming into this year. This is a team that should have made the playoffs last year. This is a team that had Jonathan Taylor, who was the NFL's league-leading rusher last year. And they had such great pieces. They had a really good defense. They had such great young pieces. And you're like, all right, get them a couple more explosive options in there in the receiving room. And this is a team that can legitimately compete for a playoff spot. Everyone was saying, like, all right, this is a team that's going to compete with the Tennessee Titans for the AFC South. Boy, could we not have been more wrong on that. We could not have been more wrong. To say that this Colts team underperformed this year would have been an understatement. Yes, they dealt with some injuries. Yes, some key players had huge missteps. Quentin Nelson just looked like a shell of himself this year. He's a Pro Bowler this year, but he did not deserve to be a Pro Bowler. I think he would even tell you this was his worst season. Jonathan Taylor was battling the injury bug for most of the year, and even when he was on the field, he wasn't the same game-breaking back that he was last year. Matt Ryan looked like a shell of himself to the point where he actually got benched for a good period of time. And Matt Ryan was the guy that Jim Irsay finally was like, all right, we're done with this fucking quarterback carousel, this rent-a-quarterback strategy. We're done with it. So Jim Irsay, I think, took matters into his own hands, fired Frank Reich, ordered the benching of Matt Ryan, who eventually went back into the starting role once Jeff Saturday took over as interim, which that was a whole fiasco. Looked great for a game and then sucked the rest of the way. So, which is fitting in a lot of ways. Jeff Saturday not being good enough to be an NFL head coach, who would have thought? But yeah, I don't know how attractive this situation looks, because had there been a head coaching opportunity for this team open at the start of the year, this would have been one of the more attractive spots because of everything that I just said, of the momentum they had last year coming into this year and the expectations and the pieces they had coming into this year. Now all of a sudden it's just like this. At the moment, this looks like it could be at best a mediocre football team. I don't know. This team has a lot of work to do. Defense fell off a cliff. Some of their exciting young pieces kind of regressed a little bit. So I don't know who you would get. Luckily for them, they are going to have the 4th overall pick at the moment. So Jim Irsay's whole "we're tired of the run-a-quarterback" strategy looks like it is going to come to an end, because remember, they have not had a stable piece at the quarterback spot since Andrew Luck surprisingly retired. Since then, they've had a new starting quarterback seemingly every single year since he's retired. So this is the year to finally kill that off and officially start fresh and officially start over. And you are in a perfect position to draft someone potentially like a CJ Stroud, like a Will Levis. You have a position to draft a guy where you can say, all right, here's a guy, let's try and build around him for the next 4 years. And not get somebody who's towards the end of their career, like they did with Phillip Rivers, like they did with Matt Ryan. They didn't do that with Carson Wentz. I think they legitimately thought Carson Wentz could be a longer-term option, which a lot of people thought, but he proved to not be the guy and actually single-handedly cost this team the playoffs last year. So that blew up in their face. So they're like, let's just step back and take a breather, and let's draft the guy to build around. And yeah, I don't know. This is like, out of all the options available, this is sort of in the middle as far as a head coach wanting to take this position. But it is intriguing nonetheless to see how the Colts handle this, because like I said, this team did have great momentum coming into the year, and it just got completely shattered. So we'll just have to wait and see. on who they hire and what this looks like. And by the way, I'm not going to dive super deep into who would be a great head coaching hire. Just to be honest, I'm not well equipped enough in that regard to give my opinion on that. And if I did try to give my opinion on it, I would just be talking out of my ass a lot of it. So I'm not going to go deep into who I think they should hire and yada, yada, yada and stuff like that. I'm just going to talk about the positions that are open and how attractive of a position they are. But the final head coaching offer that happened in the middle of the season, or I should say towards the end of the season, is that of the Denver Broncos. And that is to the surprise of absolutely no one. Nathaniel Hackett got the axe right after they got humiliated on national television on Christmas Day, losing to the Rams. What was it? 51-10 or something like that. And that was the final straw. That was the final nail in the coffin of the Nathaniel Hackett error. That is ERROR in Denver. This was a disaster from the start. Just talk about Nathaniel Hackett for a second. This is a guy who, let's just call a spade a spade. He was hired damn near strictly to try and get Aaron Rodgers. He was Aaron Rodgers' quarterback's coach or play caller, whatever, in Green Bay. Gets hired. Now, granted, Hackett was qualified in this regard, but he was basically brought in strictly to try and lure Aaron Rodgers over, because Aaron Rodgers, we've heard, speaks the world of Nathaniel Hackett. But that didn't work out. Rodgers re-signs with Green Bay. But later that day, you get Russell Wilson instead. So it's like, hey, no harm, no foul. And you're thinking, hey, if Nathaniel Hackett could do what he did last year in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but imagine what he could do with Russell Wilson. That's what everyone was saying. Like, Russell Wilson, who's younger, more athletic than Aaron Rodgers, just in a situation where they actually have more talent in Denver, at least what we were saying at the start of the year, than what they did in Green Bay, where it was just Devontae Adams and everybody else. In Denver, it's like, oh my God, you have Cortland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Tim Patrick, who didn't play this year because he got injured in training camp. You have KJ Hamler. You have all these pieces that are like, oh my gosh, this is good. Like, this team had every right to have Super Bowl expectations coming into the year. And it turned into, they went from legitimate Super Bowl contender to the biggest laughingstock, arguably, in the National Football League. Russ regressed horribly. The receivers, now all of a sudden, you don't have a lot of confidence in them because they can't stay healthy. And when they are on the field, they're not this, they may or may not be these game-breaking receivers that we think they could be. Every running back on the roster got released or injured. The offensive line fell apart. Thank God for their defense. Their defense was amazing. They were a playoff caliber defense that got wasted by an offense that at one point in the season was averaging 13 points a game. They were fighting each other on the sidelines. Players were blowing up at one another. And we've all seen it. The two clips. The first one of the defensive tackle, I keep forgetting his name, Mike Purcell, cussing and yelling at Russell Wilson while Nathaniel Hackett, the head coach, was right in front of him, didn't pay attention to it all. And then the day on Christmas where Dalton Reisner and Brett Rippon were getting into it, they were pushing and shoving each other. Both those clips showed a broken locker room with clear infighting, and both those clips had the head coach right next to the situation looking the other way. This was a team that was fundamentally broken. This was a locker room that was broken, and their head coach was way in over his head, and he didn't know how to handle it. And it's not a great look when you're team is fighting with each other and you're right next to the situation as they're fighting with each other and you're just looking the other way, not doing a goddamn thing about it. He needed to go. He needed to go. Now, Nathaniel Hackett, and this is what I'm talking about with this situation. When I talk about how attractive these offers are, Denver's probably the least attractive out of all of these. And yes, that includes the Houston Texans that we're going to get to later. Because this was a team that had so much expectations coming into the year. And not only did they underperform, like I said, they became a laughingstock. Now, all of a sudden, this was like one of the top head coaching positions coming into the season. And now you look at this and you're like, who the hell would want to take this job? Because now you're dealing with a locker room that was openly fighting with each other, that looks broken, a defense that was that kind of slowly gave less of a shit as the year gone on, because they were like, what's the point of holding teams to less than 14 points a game if we're still going to lose? And now you're dealing with a quarterback that is actively regressed, does not look like the same top 10 to top 5 quarterback that he's been in his career, had the worst season of his career by far, and you're stuck with him for at least the next 4 years, because that contract is such an anchor. So this is a really, and you don't have your first round pick this year because you traded that pick to a team that is going to be in the playoffs this weekend, because you traded that pick away to get Russell Wilson in the first place. So now you don't have any draft capital. You have a quarterback who played terribly this year and has an anchor of a contract. You have a broken locker room that is full of toxicity. This is a shit show. And God bless the man whoever takes this position, because there's a lot of work to do with this team. This is not a team that is ready to compete next year or maybe even 2 years from now, because there is so much more problems this year that wasn't just with Nathaniel Hackett. Yes, Nathaniel Hackett was a problem, but there are so much more problems with this team that need to be fixed, and some of which we don't know if they're possible of getting fixed. Russ is included in that. So yeah, that's the Broncos situation. God bless whoever takes that role, but whoever does, they're going to have their work cut out for them. That's for damn sure. But now we have two more coaching openings. Both happened right as the season ended. And the first one was the Houston Texans firing Lovie Smith. And it's a shame because I like Lovie Smith. And would he have gotten fired regardless? Probably, yes. Did him winning the final game of the season and screwing the Texans out of the number 1 overall pick help matters? No. Not at all. And there's Lovie Smith, Chicago legend, helping the Bears out once more with getting the number 1 overall pick. But as far as the Houston Texans go, this is not as dire of a situation as I think a lot of people think it is. Yes, this is arguably the worst team in football. But that's not to say that this situation is completely hopeless. I still think, even though they don't have the number 1 pick anymore, they had the 2nd overall pick, I still think they're almost a lock to get Bryce Young, because despite what everyone's saying in the media about Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears and what they should do with the number 1 pick, I don't think that if they keep it, they're not taking a quarterback. They're not doing any of that shit. I think it'd be stupid. I think they just stick with Fields in that regard. So unless the Bears trade the number 1 overall pick to a quarterback needy team, I think they're still almost a certain lock to get Bryce Young. And they still have some nice pieces. John Mechie didn't play this year. He should be back next year after dealing with the leukemia. Dameon Pierce has shown that he was an excellent pick for them. They have some nice young pieces on defense. They have something. It's not a lot, but it's something. And how much, I didn't look this up, but how much cap space are they going to have going into the offseason, real quick? Hold on one moment. So the Houston Texans, they're going to have around $41 million in cap space next year. So they are going to be spenders to an extent. So you have the draft capital. You have some pieces. You're definitely almost certain to get your franchise quarterback in the draft. So this is not a terrible situation as much as many people want to make it out to be. And I think if you get the right coach in there, now I think coaches are probably going to be hesitant because you are going to be going to a team that one and done their head coach in back-to-back seasons. They one and done David Culley in 2021, and they one and done Lovie Smith in 2022. So yeah, there are going to be some cold feet as far as that regard of who's going to want to take this position. But whoever does take that position, one, I feel like deserves a fair shot because, David Culley and Lovie Smith, yes, they got one and done, but they always sort of felt like stopgap coaches. They never felt like coaches that were like, all right, they're going to be the long-term options. So I think they're going to bring in, first of all, they bring in a head coach that I think they genuinely believe in and are like, all right, we're going to give him 3 to 4 years to see what he can do with this thing. And then after 3 and 4 years and this team hasn't gone anywhere, then that's something different. But you have to get a coach that you trust to say, all right, let's legitimately give him, that's not a stopgap, and let's legitimately give him 3 to 4 years to try and build this thing, because this thing is not dead in the water. This team is not dead in the water. This team has a chance to compete if they get the right pieces in there over the next 2 to 3 years. I genuinely believe that. So that's the Houston Texans situation. And then the last situation that is open was the Arizona Cardinals firing Cliff Kingsbury. And this was another thing that it felt like the writing was on the wall for it. It felt like it was on the wall for the past 2 seasons now. But yeah, this was Cliff Kingsbury's time as a head coach in the NFL. Is kind of another cautionary tale as to why you don't hire coaches from the college ranks straight to the NFL, is because it's a completely different game. And I'm not going to say Cliff Kingsbury was a complete and utter failure. Like, he's not Matt Rule level failure, but he definitely underperformed expectations. And this kind of was a costly move for the Arizona Cardinals, because remember, they gave him an extension in the offseason that would have made him the Cardinals head coach through 2027, and yet they axed him after this year. And it felt like they should have, because not only did the team perform terribly this year, but you saw, like, even throughout his years here in Arizona, where it was like his teams, they start out hot, they seem like they can get some going, and then the second half of the season, they just completely fall apart. I don't know whether it's because of the mentality they have as a team. I don't know if it's what they do in practice, where they run practice a certain way, and then by the second half of the season, they're just completely gassed. I don't know what it was, and this wasn't just with the Arizona Cardinals. This was going back to his days when he was coaching Texas Tech, where his teams would start out hot, and then the second half of the season, they would just hit a brick wall and completely fall apart. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it is, but yeah, but Cliff Kingsbury's teams, both in Texas Tech and in Arizona, especially with the Cardinals, like, they were built and had the mentality of a Big 12 team, where it's just offense, offense, offense. Forget about the defense, because we're spending all the money on the offense. Like, just completely offense-centric, to the defense, to the point where the defense was soft, they were plushy, and thank God for J.J. Watt for actually being a real defensive player there, and Chandler Jones for the short time he was there with Cliff Kingsbury there, of course. But thank God for them. Other than that, this was and Buda Baker, but Other than that, even with those guys there, this was not a great defensive unit. Vance Joseph, this year, frankly, the fact that Vance Joseph got this into a average defense is a miracle considering what these defenses under Cliff Kingsbury have been for the past few seasons. And that's not just on the offense, or on the defense, it's also on the offense as well, where it's just like, you watch this team, it's just like, this is a soft football team. This is a soft football team. They look like a Big 12 team taken out of the Big 12 and placed in the NFL. That's what they've looked like under Cliff Kingsbury. And you're not going to win anything like that. I'm sorry. I know the NFL is starting to adapt more like schemes from college and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean become a complete college team. But with that being said, I do think as far as the situation goes, it's kind of up in the air of how attractive this is, because you're going to be locked into Kyler Murray regardless. And that's not a bad situation, because Kyler Murray, when he's on his game, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So when he's on his game, he is one of the best you can have. So that's something. J.J. Watt just retired, but I think you keep Vance Joseph around, give him get some more pieces on the defense, and try and actually, first of all, I'd get a coach that's actually going to instill toughness into this team and say, hey, let's kick some fuckers' teeths in. Let's fucking do that for a change. Because we've seen this team over the past few years, and we've just been bullied constantly. Doesn't matter who they face, they get bullied constantly because their mentality is so soft. So they have to get somebody in there that's going to say, hey, we're going to be a tough, physical football team. At the bare minimum physical. Because under Cliff Kingsbury, they weren't even the bare minimum physical, it felt like. So now there's also some situations where it's like DeAndre Hopkins isn't happy there. The receiver room is not great. And if you have to trade away DeAndre Hopkins, which seems like they might have to, because it sounds like D-Hop isn't happy in Arizona anymore, then so be it. So you have to get talent in the receiving room, more talent, I should say. And all in all, just get this team an identity. Because that's really the problem with this Cardinals team this year, is that they never really felt like they had like a true identity. So get a coach in there that is going to have this team have a clear direction, instill toughness in them, but also have a direction of like, all right, this is what we're going to be as a football team, offensively and defensively. So who that might be, I'm not sure just yet, but we will figure out as time goes on. So that's all the head coaching situations that I just went through. And that it'll be over the next few weeks or so, like month, maybe 2 months, until we figure out who will take those roles. And once all those roles are officially taken, I will make a video talking about them. But now we're going to move on. And like I said, the playoffs start this weekend, but there are quite a bit of teams that missed out on the playoffs that you can make the argument definitely should have made the playoffs. So real quick, I'm going to give out a list. I'm going to give out a top 5 list of teams who did not make the postseason, but I think will have a lot of optimism going into next year. At the very least, be very fascinating and can compete going into next year. So that's going to be real quick. I'm just going to go through the list. Starting off at number 5. Number 5 might elicit some eye rolls from people, but number 5 is going to be the New England Patriots. This is a team that had destiny in their own hands, but let's be honest, no, they were not going to win that football game on Sunday against Buffalo. They were not. And I've said, as a Patriots fan myself, I've kind of said I didn't really want this team in the postseason because this team had so many problems with it, more specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And so why is this team number 5 on this list of teams that have optimism going into next year? Simple. I want to see this team with a real offensive coordinator. I don't care who it is. It cannot be Matt Patricia. As long as this team strips play calling duties and offensive duties away from Patricia and Joe Judge, fire Cam McCord for one, move Joe Judge back to the special teams coordinator, and fire Cam McCord. You cannot keep him as the special teams coordinator after giving up not one but 2 kickoff return touchdowns in the final game of the season in a must-win game. You cannot allow that to happen. And also, I don't know what the hell you do with Matt Patricia. If you want to keep him on the roster, Bill, or the coaching staff, Bill, you can, but he cannot be the one calling plays. So bring in somebody. I don't care if it's Bill O'Brien. I don't care if it's somebody from internally, whether it be Nick Caley or Mick Lombardi from Las Vegas. Shit. There are some rumors going around that Cliff Kingsbury could be in the mix. Bring him in and have it be I wouldn't mind that either. Where it's a situation where it's like, all right, you have Bill focusing on the defense and Cliff focusing on the offense. Regardless, it has to be somebody that you're like, all right, they are focusing on the offense. And it cannot be Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia, I just wonder what this team could have done this year had they had a real coordinator calling plays. And everyone's saying, oh, Mac isn't the guy. Mac's regressed, and he has regressed. And I'm not saying Mac hasn't. But I feel like people shouldn't hold this season against Mac Jones because we saw what he can do when he has a real offensive coach. In his rookie year, he was good enough to be a Pro Bowl selection, granted as a Pro Bowl alternate, but he was still deemed good enough to get that distinction anyway. So we saw what he can do when he has a real offensive coach. So give him a real coach for 2023. Now, if you get to the end of 2023 and you're still having questions about whether he's the guy or not, then it's time to start talking about, all right, he's not the guy, let's move on. But I think you should pump the brakes on that a little bit, give him a chance, give him a real coach, a real offensive play caller, and then you see what you could do from there. But I say this team has optimism because really, if you get this team a real offensive coach, you give them some more explosiveness on the offensive side with that defense, this has the potential, and they have about $50 million in available cap space, so they will have money to spend. This is setting up to be a really dangerous team going into next year, potentially. They really have that potential to do that. So this is going to be a very interesting offseason of how they handle this. But as long as they get a real offensive coordinator and get some more explosiveness on the offensive side of the ball, this team could be as good as they want to be in 2023. Moving on to number 4 on this list. And this might surprise some people, but number 4 in my eyes are the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team that came on really late in the year. All of a sudden was in a spot out of nowhere where they had a legitimate chance of making the postseason. Obviously didn't work out for them, but Mike Tomlin still does not have a losing season. Miraculous. I'm shocked that he dragged this team that was 2-6 at one point and dragged them to a winning record. Granted, they were kicking and screaming on their way to that winning record, but it was a winning record nonetheless. And this is a team where it's like, all right, you've seen, especially late in the year, you might have something in Kenny Pickett here. You spend a first-round pick on him with the expectations that he's going to be the guy, and he's shown late in the year that he absolutely can be the guy. And Najee Harris had a 1,000-yard rushing season, though didn't really feel like it, which brings me to the first order of business for the offseason. You have to improve that offensive line. This offensive line has been bad for the past few years now. Now you have to improve at it, whether it's through free agency, whether it's through the draft. It does not matter. Offensive line has to be the priority here because you have the quarterback, you have the running game, or the running backs, I should say. You have the receiver talent because George Pickens has been a stud. Deontay Johnson has kind of been almost kind of forgotten in a lot of senses, but he's still really good when he's on his game. I say add a couple more options in the receiving room to get some more depth in, though I will say you still have Calvin Austin, who you drafted last year, who Calvin Austin was a guy in last year's draft that I fell in love with. So if you choose to move on from Deontay Johnson at some point in the future and have Calvin Austin, or even start next year having Calvin Austin start getting more reps in the slot, this could be a really fun team to watch potentially offensively if you improve the offensive line, of course. Defensively, I think you add some more depth. Fuck. My brain doesn't work sometimes. You got to add more depth pieces because injuries was an issue for them, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where you missed TJ Watt for a significant time. You missed Minkah Fitzpatrick for a few games this year. Corner, they had some injuries a lot at the corner spot this year. So you got to get some more depth on there. But all in all, this is shaping up to be a team that, hey, like I said, if you improve the offensive line, it's a team that could potentially be really fun to watch next year. Now, I'm not saying that in their division with the Bengals and the Ravens that they could compete for the AFC North. I'm not going to go that far. But can this be a team that can get into the postseason next year as a fifth seed or a sixth seed? Absolutely. I think this totally could be a team like that. So, number 4, as far as optimism going into next year, is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 3 is, I know some people are going to have recency bias and say, no, it's not. But number 3 is going to be the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not looking forward, and I'm sure many people are not looking forward to another offseason of what the hell is Aaron Rodgers going to do. I don't think anyone's looking forward to that again. But take that out of the picture. Say what you will. This was a really good team late in the year. This was a really good team in the latter half of the season where they were in legitimate control of their playoff lives. Now they choked it away week 17 against the Lions, mainly just because they just fell apart. Stupid penalties, stupid personal fouls. Quay Walker needs a fucking maturity check instantly. Same goes for Devontae Wyatt because he was not innocent. And so, yeah, they fell apart. But that doesn't take away from the fact that in the latter half of this season, they were a really good football team. And Aaron Rodgers was finally starting to trust some of these guys. Though you saw in that last game of the season, he's starting to get a little bit of that Devontae Adams syndrome again. This time with Christian Watson, where it was like, all right, now he's just trying to force it to Christian Watson every play. So he fell back into that regard, and that is still a problem with Aaron Rodgers, is that when he finds a guy he trusts, he will zone into him no matter what. But it is nice to know that Christian Watson has morphed into that guy, and I'm really excited to see with a new full offseason, with basically the role as the legitimate number 1 receiver, what Christian Watson is going to look like next year. I'm really excited to see how Christian Watson develops further. But not to say they also have some other really great pieces, both offensively and defensively. Defensively, Rashawn Gary was injured for the latter half of the season, but he's a monster when he's out there. Jair Alexander's still one of the best corners in football. And yeah, this is a team that's like, they have a lot of young pieces, and get some more in there with Rodgers trusting more of these guys. I totally think this could be a good team going into next year that can battle for a playoff spot. I wouldn't think anything less based on what they showed towards the end of the season. So yeah, number 3 are going to be the Green Bay Packers. Now, these last two teams are teams that I think will absolutely, even if they don't make, well, exception of number 2, but I think they can absolutely make the playoffs next year. These last 2, I'm almost for sure certain that they are going to make the playoffs next year. And number 2 starts with the New York Jets. This is a team, this is not like the Denver Broncos of last year. This is a team that is legitimately, and I mean this wholeheartedly, legitimately a decent starting quarterback away from being a playoff team. And I am serious. They have everything. They have great talent at the receiver spot. They have great running backs. Imagine what this team would have looked like if Breece Hall not gotten injured. They have the right head coach. They have the defense. They have the right GM to put everything together. They have everything. Except for the most important position. The quarterback position. And I think it's clear as day that I don't think Mike White's the guy. It's clear Zach Wilson isn't the guy. Zach Wilson needs to go somewhere else. I think this was his last year as a New York Jet for sure. I don't know what the Jets would get for him. If they are able to get anything for him, it would be a win. But yeah, man, this is the quarterback position this year, whether it was Wilson, mostly Zach Wilson, it was rough to watch. And Zach Wilson, I think, even though he didn't play in a lot of the games this year, or the majority of the games, I should say, you can make the argument that he single-handedly held this team back from reaching its full potential. So, yeah. Now, the question is, who's the quarterback next year? To me, it's two options. Jimmy Garoppolo or Derek Carr. It's one of those two options. Now, you could draft someone, but you're in a position where it's like, you're not going to get one of these top guys, and if you do, it's going to be someone like an Anthony Richardson who's not in any way, shape, or form ready to start right away. So, who do you go to if you do end up drafting a guy? So, to me, it screams that they're going to trade for a quarterback. To me, it's either going to be Jimmy G or Derek Carr. It makes all the sense in the world. I mean, Jimmy G, he would be going to a place where he knows the system. He's familiar with the coaching staff. He's familiar with the system there. So it would just be like, hey, straight from San Francisco to New York. Boom, let's go. He's good enough. He's good enough to take a team to the playoffs. He's good enough not necessarily to win games for teams, but he's also not going to lose games for teams. Match made in heaven, really, if you think about it. And then you have Derek Carr, who he didn't play well this year. Let's just call a spade a spade. Derek Carr did not play well this year. But I think he got an unfair rap as far as like saying like, oh, he sucks. He's not a franchise quarterback. Now, I don't think he's a franchise quarterback, but everyone's saying he sucks. He shouldn't be a starter anymore in this league. I think is ridiculous. I think he had flashes this year. I know I'm picking at straws a little bit because there weren't that many, but I do think Derek Carr just ultimately needs a change of scenery, and I don't entirely know if the coaching staff entirely believed in Derek Carr. I mean, you got the sense that the Raiders organization, even though they gave him the extension in the offseason, never really had full belief in Derek Carr. You always kind of got that sense. So I think a change of scenery is definitely in need for him. And you know what? Why not trade Zach Wilson in exchange for Derek Carr? You don't need to put any draft picks in there. You can if you want to. But just a straight quarterback for quarterback trade and see how Zach Wilson performs there. Now, if Zach Wilson didn't perform well in New York, imagine what he's going to do in a Josh McDaniels offense, which is widely known as one of the more complicated offenses to learn in football. Now, we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But wouldn't hurt to help. Wouldn't hurt to see it. So, especially if you're the Raiders, you're not going to be committal to Zach Wilson long term. But as far as for Derek Carr, I think New York would be a perfect situation around him, where he would have good coaching around him. He would have great talent around him. He would have a great defense to support him. I think he'd be just good enough to get this team over the hump, at least into the postseason, to get this young team playoff experience, even if they don't make it far into the playoffs. Just the fact that they get into the playoffs to get that experience would help this team in the long run dramatically. So that's my number 2 team is the New York Jets. And number 1, I think y'all kind of figure it out at this point. Is a team that frankly should have been in the postseason this year. Number 1, it is the Detroit Lions. This is a team that should have been in the playoffs this year. I really wish they were. And that 1-6 start at the start of the year really came back and bit this team in the ass. But this team was on a roll late in the year, and that win against the Green Bay Packers to end the regular season really solidified that, hey, this team come 2023, add a bit more talent, maybe on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side. Get Jameson Williams. Like, I cannot wait to see next year with Jameson Williams in this offense. Now that he's actually going to have an offseason and a training camp that he's actually going to participate in, I can't wait to see what this team looks like with Jameson Williams as a full-time starter. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, man. And this team is, like I said, they should have been in the playoffs, but they are a force to be reckoned with. We know for sure they got the coach right. Dan Campbell has come in and in just 2 years completely turned this thing around, where there is so much hope around this team that this organization has not had in a long, long time. And I'm not going to sit here and say like they can be a Super Bowl contender next year. I think they're still like a couple of years away from that. But as far as being like playoff contenders and potentially NFC North contenders, who's to say they can't? If luck is on their side, who's to say that they can't? You know? Now the question is, maybe the only real question is, what do you do with Jared Goff full time? Now, Jared Goff has shown that when you have the right pieces around him, he can play like a top 10 quarterback in the league. But you can't imagine that they're going to look at Jared Goff as the answer. Now, luckily for them, they can draft a quarterback if they want to, because they're going to have the 6th overall pick this year, thanks and courtesy to the Los Angeles Rams because of the Matthew Stafford trade. So they're going to be in a position where they could potentially draft a quarterback here. So if they want to, or if they want to trade up if they want to, because how many draft picks do they have this year? Let me look real quick. Hold on one moment. So they have 8 draft picks this year. They currently have 8 draft picks. So they could have the ammo potentially to move up to take a quarterback if they want to. They don't have to because they have the 6th overall pick, but if they wanted to, they can move up and get a guy and then have him sit under Jared Goff while that guy develops and then roll with him in the future, whether that's a CJ Stroud, whether that's a Will Levis. Now, it won't be the Bears because you can't trade in, or you can trade interdivision, but I can't imagine the Bears, unless it's for the right price, would just hand the Detroit Lions Bryce Young on a silver platter. But, yeah, this team, regardless of how you play it, has so much optimism around it, and they have a great thing going, and they are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Give this team some more talent. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with come next season. So I am super excited to see how this plays out for the Detroit Lions. This is going to be so fun to watch next year. I can't wait for it already. But yeah, that is my top 5 teams who didn't make the postseason but have optimism to some degree going into 2023. So now, to end off the episode, I want to give you guys my predictions for Super Wildcard Weekend and how I think each of these 6 games are going to play out. Now, I know I usually do my weekly picks on Patreon, but because we are now in the postseason and we are getting closer to the off season, I want to get fully into the draft evaluations, my draft work. So I'm using that to that's going to be taking up most of my free time, so I'm not going to have a lot of time to make videos to put on Patreon, especially because we're going to only get closer in game, like fewer games as the week go on. So I'm deciding to just do these as a part of the podcast over the next few weeks during the postseason, starting off this weekend talking about all 6 games. And that first starts off with the 2 games on Saturday. And that first game is going to be the Seattle Seahawks heading to San Francisco to take on the San Francisco 49ers. Now, who would have thought, real quick, who would have thought that when this season first started, that the Seattle Seahawks would be participating in postseason play? This is a team that everyone and their mother thought that they were in the Bryce Young sweepstakes. They were a team that we all thought they're for sure competing for the number 1 overall pick. I mean, my God, like, they're starting Geno Smith. What the hell? Like, this team's waving the white flag. Everyone's saying trade away DK, trade away Tyler Lockett, try and get as many draft picks for those guys as you can. Little did we know that Geno Smith was going to go on to break the Seahawks single season passing record. You could say about the extra game all you want, but this was a really impressive season for the Seattle Seahawks, to say the least. And Geno got a Pro Bowl nod, deserved it. He played his ass off this year. This team, now the defense is still a problem in some areas, but even then, you still hit on young guys like Tariq Woolen. He looks like he's going to be a stud. But yeah, this is a team that overperformed. And I can't even say overperformed, because you look at their games, like they were a legitimately good football team this year. And they definitely deserve to be in the postseason for sure. But just because I say they deserve to be in the playoffs doesn't mean I think they're going to make it out of the first round, especially considering they are playing against arguably the most complete team in the NFL in the San Francisco 49ers. Like, this Niners team, it is ridiculous how stacked top to bottom this team is. And yeah, man, as much as this season has been a Cinderella-like run for the Seahawks, I do think it'll come to an end on Saturday, because this Niners team is just too overpowering in all facets, really. And I talked about how the Seahawks defense has been a problem. Brock Purdy has played really well this year. You could say he's pretty good. I know everyone's sick and tired of hearing that line, but it's still funny. But this team has talent everywhere, and that defense, I love Geno. I love him to death. But now, granted, I don't know. Maybe Geno comes out with a fire in his ass. Maybe this Seahawks team comes out and just completely not does whatever they want, because this Niners defense is too good. But maybe it's a situation where the Niners play down to their opponent potentially. It'd be stupid at this point, because I think the Seahawks have warranted respect. But yeah, man, regardless, I don't see this ending well for Seattle. I'm picking the San Francisco 49ers to win this game. Is there potential that the Seahawks could pull an upset? No. In all these games, there are definitely upset potential, aside from maybe one other. But this is not one of those games. I can't envision as much as I would love to see it. I would love to see a world where Seattle pulls off the upset here. Do I think it's going to happen? No. So I'm picking San Francisco to win this game over Seattle. And then we transition into Saturday night. And this should be a really fun game that I'm excited for. The Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. A team in the Jaguars that was ruled dead in the middle of the year, made a late season resurgence that perfectly coincided with a Tennessee Titans collapse, losing 7 straight games. And the Jaguars took advantage of that, went on a winning streak, now have a home playoff game as AFC South champions. And they're playing against a Chargers team that they were kind of up and down for most of the year. They battle some injuries, though it's the Chargers. That's going to happen eventually. And hell, they even dealt with Mike Williams getting injured in what was basically a meaningless game in Week 18 against the Broncos. But even then, like, both teams, this should be a really fun game because both teams are extremely talented. I could really see this going either way. but I think the Jaguars just have all the momentum right now. I think they're good enough to win at least one playoff game. And even if they don't, this Jaguar season, regardless of how you look at it, was a success. To go from where the hell they were last year to the worst team in football, a complete clown show, to winning their division and having a home playoff game, regardless of what you look at it, this was a successful season for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think it's only up from here. And even though I'm saying, like, it sounds like the season is going to come to an end this Saturday, I don't think it will. I think the Jaguars are going to pull out the edge over the Chargers. I think it's going to be a close game, though. I think it's going to be a fun game, and I think it's going to result in one where the Jaguars come out on top. So I will be picking the Jacksonville Jaguars to pull out the victory in this game and advance to the divisional round. Then we get into Sunday, and I'm going to take this time now to say that on Sunday, I will be streaming all day on Sunday. All three of these games I will be streaming here on YouTube.com. And that will start with the Miami Dolphins taking on the Buffalo Bills, who we found out today that Tua will not be playing. Once again, he is still in concussion protocol. He is still not cleared to play. And it will be Skylar Thompson once again, which means it's going to be a Buffalo Bill victory. I'm sorry. Like, yes, the Dolphins beat the Bills earlier this year, but that was back in week 3. And the Bills beat the Dolphins late in the year at home. This is going to be a game in Buffalo. And you're playing against Skylar Thompson. I'm sorry. Like, do I even need to say anymore? The Buffalo Bills are going to win this game. And I don't say things like are pretty often when it comes to predictions, but this is one of the very few things where I'm like, I'm pretty confident that Buffalo's going to pull out the victory and demolish, damn near demolish Miami. So yeah, Buffalo wins, simple, straightforward. But then the next game is going to be the New York Giants taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Tale of two teams, because the Giants started off hot, kind of got into a cold period, then got hot again, clinching a playoff berth. And then you have the Minnesota Vikings, who have lived off of one-score games this year, but kind of backed into the playoffs a little bit. And I don't know, this just feels like a game where it's like the Giants are starting to get that magic back a little bit that they had through the first half of the season. And I don't know what it is, but it just feels like the Vikings' luck when it comes to these one-score games might be running out fairly soon. And they have not played well the last like 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And the Giants have. And so much to the point where you're actually like, the Giants have like hope that like, hey, if Daniel Jones plays, we have a chance of winning, which I would have thought that. But yeah, I do think this is going to be the first upset of the postseason, and I think they will come courtesy of the New York Giants beating the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Now, that stadium during playoff time, I heard, is much different. It's a much different environment than what it is during the regular season. So it will be a tough environment for the Giants to play in, but I think the Giants are going to do just enough to edge out the Minnesota Vikings and beat them at their game, which is beating them in a one-score game. So I think the Vikings' luck will run out. I think the Giants' luck is going to continue. And I think the New York Giants are going to walk out of Wild Card Weekend with the W. And then the final game on Sunday is going to be prime time. The Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati, 1 week removed from the Bengals beating the Baltimore Ravens to win the division in Week 18. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals, what else can you say about them? In my eyes, they are still the best team in football, though the Chiefs and Bills are pretty close in that regard. But I still think that the Cincinnati Bengals are the probably going to be the most feared team, at least in the AFC bracket. What else can you say about them? Excellent offense, elite quarterback, elite receiving talent, great running game, fucking really good defense that really a defense that you don't expect to be as good as they are, but they are. And you're playing against a Ravens team for the second straight week where we once again are probably not going to see Lamar again. So you're probably going to go back to playing, I don't even know who. Who was their quarterback this week? It was, it was a third stringer. Shit, what was his name? Hold on. Anthony Brown. That's who it was. You're probably going to see Anthony Brown again this week. So, yeah, man. There's really nothing else to say. I think it's going to be not an easy victory for the Bengals because I think the Ravens are still going to put up as much of a fight as they can. But I still think regardless, it's going to be a Cincinnati Bengals victory through and through. There's really nothing else to say about that. And then to cap it off, the final game of Wildcard Weekend, Monday night, the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. Honestly, the game that I'm looking forward to the least. The Bucs, they won their division, but this was just not a good Bucs team this year. I hate to break it to you, but this was just not a good Buccaneers team at all this year. They've underperformed horribly. Tom Brady has looked like he's regressed. Defense was not as good as you'd hope it to be. Offense was not as good as you hope it to be. But luckily for them, they're playing against a Cowboys team that, let's just call it a spade. Let's just call a spade a spade. They looked really bad against the Commanders in that last game of the season. And I'm sorry, Cowboys fans, but if you get that Dak Prescott against Tampa, your season's over. I hate to break it to you. Your season's over. And I still have not had the full hope of, can Dak Prescott actually help this team win a playoff game? And I think Tampa, even though they don't deserve to be in the playoffs in my eyes, I think Tampa will live another day, and I think they're going to pull out the victory against the Dallas Cowboys, simply because I just don't trust the Cowboys' offense anymore all of a sudden if we get that performance that we got against the Commanders. Now, that could be just a situation where they were playing down to their competition. That very well could be. But will that be another situation where they're playing against a Bucs team that, even though I still said they were not as good, still are better than the Commanders? We don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But I do think the Bucs, as a result, will live to fight another day. And I think Tampa will come out of this weekend victorious and will advance into the divisional round. But with that out of the way, we are done. That is a wrap on the episode. Once again, if you have not already, please like, subscribe, and share this video if you enjoy this type of content. There we go. And if you have not already, please go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod and go support me on Patreon if you like to at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. A link to those will be in the description down below. With that being said, though, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.